Hey guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to another What's for Dinner video. For this first meal, we are going to be making $1 million spaghetti squash. I believe I have shared this with you before. I know I have made it before, but I'm going to share it with you again. It's really good. And I'm going to try a trick to cut my spaghetti squash because I have crummy knives. I meant to pick one up today when I was at the store and I forgot. So I'm going to try a trick that I have seen and see if it helps at all. So let's give that a try and then we will get to making the dinner. All right, so I think I need to adjust the camera before I get started. I think you're supposed to score it with a knife. So this is a sharp, kind of a sharp knife, but it's not like strong enough to cut through the whole thing, because obviously it's not big. So score it where you want to cut it. So we're gonna start with that. And then I think you're supposed to poke some holes. I've never done it like this before. Now I'm supposed to put this in the microwave for a couple of minutes. I've seen a wide range, so I'm gonna start with just 3 minutes. Supposedly this makes this easier to cut this thing in half. All right, so I stopped it after like 2 minutes because I heard it like sizzling. Let me get my real knife and see. It might have just been because it was starting to leak juices. Well, this is definitely a little bit easier. All right, so I've got my foil lined baking sheet. We're just gonna pop these on upside down and throw them in the oven. I'm doing 425. I a lot of times just do 400, but the recipe for this particular one says 400. And this is not a super huge spaghetti squash, but probably be about 30 minutes. You can do it until it's fork tender. Usually I pierce this through, a fork through, and if that goes through without too much resistance, then it's ready. You don't want it to be super mushy. I'm also gonna put a little bit of water on the bottom here. I don't always do that, but I feel like it does sometimes kind of create like a steaming thing. I don't know if you can tell, but not a ton of water, just a little bit. So I'm just gonna go ahead and brown up 1 pound of ground beef, and I'm going to check on the spaghetti squash because that timer is just finished. All right, so this is done. So this one only took 30 minutes at 425. It's just gonna depend on the size of your spaghetti squash. So I'm gonna finish everything else and then we will make the $1 million spaghetti squash happen. Okay, now that the beef is browned up, we're gonna add in tomato sauce. The recipe calls for, the recipe says 798 milliliters, which I believe it's 2 cans of this because I had to Google. I don't think it's quite 2 cans, but I think that's what I'm gonna do. All right, so 2 cans may have been a little too much, but it's close enough. Recipe calls for 1 teaspoon of oregano, half a teaspoon of basil, 1/4 teaspoon of thyme. I almost stumped this in. If you saw my recent mishap with parsley, I almost did the same thing with thyme. Did that in my last video. And a half a teaspoon of garlic powder, I need to give this a stir because it's bubbling on me. And 1 teaspoon of salt, and then you could do 1 teaspoon of pepper if you like that. I don't usually cook with pepper. And we're going to just stir this together and let this simmer for just a minute. So I've decided to do this a little bit different. You could just, I pulled the spaghetti squash away, and you could just put everything in here. That's what I did last time, but I feel like I want it to be more evenly mixed, so I'm gonna take the contents out. Be careful, because this is hot. Thankfully, this has been sitting for a little while. And we're gonna put this in a baking dish of which I have sprayed. Hopefully, I picked a big enough baking dish. So for this recipe, you may need to use a conversion calculator on Google because it's in different measurements. Oh, goodness. I was trying to open up ricotta cheese and I broke the little tab that helps you open it. So in a bowl, we're going to mix 1 container of ricotta cheese. All right, my counters are kind of full right now because I'm doing multiple things at once. So I went and got some shredded cheese and shredded mozzarella cheese and a Parmesan cheese, and that is what I'm mixing together here. And so like I said, you would be, if you follow the recipe, you're just gonna be putting these inside the spaghetti squash. But we're going to layer this basically like baked ziti or lasagna, but with spaghetti squash. So let's do this. All right, so I guess I could have put some of this at the bottom since I'm doing this differently, but that's okay. I did spray that. So we're gonna put, I also think my beef tomato mixture might be a bit much because my spaghetti squash was on the smaller side. So you're supposed to put half of this down, then the cheese, and then more sauce, but I don't think we're gonna be able to use all of this. Maybe we could have if I had used a bigger baking dish. All right, we're gonna make this work. All right, so I didn't quite use the rest of the meat sauce. I feel like because my spaghetti squash was a little smaller, that might have been too much, plus I clearly should have used a bigger dish. We're just gonna put some more cheese on top and we're gonna pop this in the oven. I don't know, 15 minutes maybe? I gotta look. All right, we're gonna pop this back in the oven for about 10 minutes until it looks melty. You can also broil it for a couple if you want, but that's it. Here it is, all out of the oven, nice and bubbly. We're gonna serve this up. Here it is at all of its cheesy, saucy goodness, and it's kind of like $1 million spaghetti, I guess, or baked ziti, or really lasagna, just with spaghetti squash instead, and it's really, really good. So for this next recipe, we are making a creamy potato veggies type soup. I feel like I've done these before, but it's never the same twice. So I'm just going to kind of talk you through it. We had a friend in town staying with us for a few days, and so there's a lot of chatter going on while I'm cooking. But anyways, I'm sauteing up some onion and celery and some sliced carrots. You can do however much you want. I also threw in some garlic, and really this is all very much just to taste whatever kind of sounds good for you. But I like to saute these first because I personally like my onions and celery really, really tender in a soup, because otherwise I'm not a huge fan. And then I'm going to add in some chicken broth. This was one of those large cartons, and I added in a little bit more than half, so it was probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 cups. I think I come back and put a little bit more into. But you really can't go wrong here. I peeled and diced up probably about 2 cups worth of potatoes, and I was just kind of using up some things that I had on hand. The soup came out so good. It really always does, even though it's never quite the same twice. But we are just going to give that a stir, and we're going to let that come up to a simmer. Here I am adding a little more broth, and we just want the potatoes to become tender. And so then on the side, we're going to start making a roux, and I know the lighting's a little bit bad, but it will get better. And that's, okay, melting the butter, coming back, and throwing in some frozen broccoli. Sorry, it's a little back and forth here. Also adding in a can of corn, giving that a stir, and then we're going to let that cook that broccoli. So with the roux, you're going to do about equal portions of butter and flour, and I'm just whisking that as I'm adding in the flour and letting that cook for a moment. And then we're going to add in some milk and kind of pour in just a little bit at a time as we whisk it. I think I'm doing about 2 cups here, and I'm using almond milk. You can use regular milk, you can even use heavy cream. Then we're going to melt in some shredded cheese. You can also do sour cream and cream cheese, any combination of those really. So I know this isn't a recipe, but perhaps if you are not someone who cooks often, this will give you some tips and tricks for kind of how to cook on the fly. because there really isn't a wrong way, in my opinion, for this kind of thing. So you just kind of go to taste. So we're going to melt down all of that cheese. I think I did about 2 cups of cheese, and it was probably sharp cheddar. It could have been Monterey Jack. I'm not totally sure what I did, but it was one of those two. And then I'm just checking to see if this broccoli is tender. And the broccoli that I get is, oh, we're not there yet. Okay, now we're adding in some ham. This is the pre-cooked sliced ham from Aldi. It's the Never Any brand. You don't have to get that one, but I love that. We use it for breakfast, we use it for lunches, and I love it in soups and casseroles as well. And I'm just pulling out some broccoli that was pretty big chunks, because that's how my frozen broccoli is. And now that it's a little bit more tender, I'm just cutting it up and tossing it back in. I'm doing it this way, probably not the best way. My hands, or the broccoli was pretty hot, but that's okay. And now we're going to add in our milk and cheese mixture. We're going to mix that all together. Found a little bit more of the big chunks of broccoli. And I asked my husband to come over and turn off the camera, and he apparently decided to try to do some gang signs or something. I have no idea what he's doing there. But this is the soup. I think this was after we had served it, but it came out really, really good. So now we're moving on to a quick and easy skillet meal. This was a just very quick, I don't remember what night this was, but I needed something quick. So we're heating up some avocado oil, and then we are going to slice up this kielbasa. I get this from Aldi. It's kind of my go-to. I say it every time. It's really not my favorite in that I know it's not really good for me. I don't like a lot of processed food like that, but it's kind of my go-to for these quick and easy meals, so I do tend to keep it on hand. So we're just going to slice that up and cook it. You don't have to be as precise as I am, laying them all down flat, but I do like when they get nice and brown on each side. It just brings out some good flavor, and so, you know, I'm making sure to flip each one of them over. You don't have to be as precise if you want. You know, you don't need to be particular like that. Excuse me, I feel like my voice is a little groggy, so sorry about that, but you know, I film when I have time, not necessarily when it's optimal vocal time. So once my kielbasa is nice and cooked, we're tossing in some riced cauliflower and a bag of broccoli. So this is, and again, this is a very super basic, quick and easy meal. Does not take much time to put together. The only thing you're slicing is the kielbasa. I threw in about a tablespoon of butter and just a tiny bit of chicken broth. I had some left over, I guess from when I made that soup. And so I just put in, I don't know, a couple tablespoons, maybe a quarter of a cup, just for some liquid, although there's a lot of liquid from the frozen broccoli and frozen rice cauliflower, but that's what I'm doing. And then we're just gonna put the lid on and let it steam up. If you like this type of video, if you're enjoying this, please give it a thumbs up to help me out. I would really appreciate it. And also subscribe if you are new. I love to do what's for dinner and share some great recipes with you. I also do hauls and vlogs and other fun stuff, DIYs, decor stuff. So I'd love it if you would subscribe, stick around, watch the videos that interest you, and skip the ones that don't. My feelings won't be hurt. I don't tend to take things personally. The kielbasa has a lot of flavor, but because of the broccoli and rice cauliflower, I added in a little bit of salt and garlic powder, and that was it for this meal, and it was super delicious and very easy to put together. Okay, so for tonight's dinner, we're going to be making a bacon cheeseburger tater tot casserole. Sorry, it's a mouthful. I've got the oven preheating to 400 degrees, and I'm going to heat up this pan, I guess probably on medium-ish heat, and put in about a tablespoon of butter, and then we're going to brown up a pound of ground beef and about a half of an onion. I will have the original recipe linked in the description box below. I am cutting it in half because it calls for 2 pounds of ground beef, and that seems like a lot for just my husband and I. Alright, so once your beef is all cooked, you're going to drain any fat. Mine does not have any. I have extremely lean ground beef. And then we're going to add in, again, I'm adjusting a little bit because I'm not doing the full recipe. So let's see, I'm gonna do a half a cup. I might do a little bit more of the ketchup than it says. The recipe calls for ketchup, mustard, and mayo, and I just cannot do mayo. I realize I'm talking while I'm banging. All right, so yes, the recipe calls for ketchup, mustard, and mayonnaise, and I don't like mayonnaise at all. So I don't want to put that in, but I also don't want there to be too little liquid. So I'm putting in just a little bit more than what I think for the mustard and ketchup. So I'm trying to eyeball this and cut it in half. And then we're gonna add in some salt. You'll also add in pepper if you like that. I don't like black pepper, so I don't cook with that. And then we're gonna put in some onion powder. And garlic powder. Now we're also gonna add in some real bacon bits. I was gonna cook my own, but the recipe actually didn't say that you needed to, and I had these on hand, so I took the easy way out. I think the recipe calls for a cup here, but obviously I don't need to do that because making less, but I don't know how much is in one of these, so we'll just put the whole thing in. I'm gonna mix this all together. I think I'm gonna probably end up adding a little bit more ketchup and mustard just to make sure this is not dry. You probably won't have that problem if you just follow the recipe as is, or if you actually measure. So I'm using my smaller casserole dish. The recipe called for 9 by 13, but I'm assuming this is fine since I'm using half the amount of meat, and I have just greased that, and then we're going to pour this in. Okay, and the recipe says for a, I think I'm supposed to be using a cup total of cheddar and mozzarella blend. I just shredded up both, and I'm not gonna fully measure. I'm just gonna kind of cover it. There's the cheddar. Here's the mozzarella. I'm gonna take some tater tots, or I've got these potato puffs from Aldi, place them in a single layer. I'm not even gonna worry about the amount, just gonna do it till I have a single layer. I've got a little bit from a previous bag. All right, so we're gonna put this in the oven at 400 degrees for 35 minutes. Now the instructions for these tater tots is 425 for 15 minutes, and then you flip for another 5 to 7 minutes. So this is a little bit lower temp, but a much longer time. So I'll probably check them after 25 minutes or so, just to be sure. The recipe doesn't say to go by the packaging of your tater tots, but just to be sure, I'm gonna check it probably at 25 minutes. All right, so I still have about 7 or 8 minutes left on the 35-minute timer, and I think that's gonna be adequate. So now we're going to add some more cheese. And some more bacon bits on top. We're gonna put this back in the oven for another 6 to 8 minutes. All right, here it is all done, and it just has to let it sit for a couple of minutes before we serve it, probably so that it doesn't fall completely apart. So that's what we're going to do. All right, so we decided to just serve this with a side of pickles, because pickles go with bacon cheeseburgers. And normally we do like an official like veggie with our meals, usually sometimes even 2, but we just took an easy route out. And let me just say that this was so good. I would definitely make this again. I would love to make this to like bring to family or like dish to pass type of thing. Anyways, that's gonna be it. I did not actually film an ending, so that's it for this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe if you are new, and I will see you in my next video. Thanks, guys.